All right, sports fan. How's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, 1 year ago, the Detroit Pistons were wrapping up their worst stretch in franchise history. The Pistons had just completed their eighth consecutive non-winning season, and they had just lost a franchise worst 68 games. Now, then in stepped JB Bickerstaff, who was fresh off of being fired by the Cleveland Cavaliers after helping to resurrect their franchise. And when Bickerstaff came to Detroit last summer, how many of us really knew that Bickerstaff was about to do the same thing in Detroit that he did in Cleveland, and maybe even better? Okay, and I say this because in one season, Bickerstaff took a Pistons team that had only won 14 games last year and not only more than tripled their victory production from the season before, but he led Detroit to a postseason appearance for the first time since 2019, while their 44 wins during the regular season were almost as much as they have had over the previous 3 years combined. Now, we just saw the Pistons give it their all in that series with the New York Knicks in round one of the playoffs before they bowed out in 6 games. And if you're Detroit, you got to hang your heads high because you were very competitive throughout that series and you lost all 4 games by a combined 17 points. At the end of the day, the young Pistons, they've got to learn from this, okay? Because in those losses, Detroit had the lead going into the fourth quarter in 2 of those games. And in each of those games that they lost, they had a chance to win that contest late. They just couldn't overcome the hump. You don't want to play the what if card for the Pistons, but nonetheless, you got a situation where, hey, you didn't have your enforcer, your energy guy, so to speak, in Isaiah Stewart. He was out with the knee injury, only played 1 game, and he's not a points guy, but like I said, he's an enforcer at both ends of the floor, and he's a tone setter, if you will. And Detroit didn't have that, and of course, Jaden Ivey being out with that injury since early January changed things for the Pistons on offense, and that's important. The reason why I bring that up is because Detroit needs that second option behind Cade Cunningham, and that's something that they're going to have to, address going forward with this team. But nonetheless, Cade Cunningham has showed he's the real deal. Okay, he made a believer out of me. I was critical of him in past seasons, and I'm here to tell you. I said it before, and I'll say it again. I was wrong. Like this young man showed up and showed out all season long. Had his first All-Star game appearance this past season, and on top of that, you look at what he did in this postseason series against the Knicks: 25 points per game, nearly 9 assists, and more than 8 rebounds in his postseason debut. So again, the future is looking bright for this team in the Motor City, not just because of the talent that the Pistons have on the court, also because they've got some financial flexibility. You look at the Pistons, Cunningham is really the only guy who they have big money committed to for the long term. They have only got Tobias Harris under contract for 1 more year. Tim Hardaway Jr., the veteran, he's a free agent. Isaiah Stewart is signed up for the next couple of years on a manageable contract. You have a lot of rookie options for guys such as Jaden Ivey, who you expect to come back and be healthy from his injury. So again, there's a lot of financial flexibility for the Pistons. There's also expected to be, a lot of player movement throughout the NBA this summer, and I think large in part due to that additional luxury tax apron. And I think you're going to see some teams who have committed big contracts to guys try to get off of that. And for the first time in a very long time, Detroit is looking, like a viable spot. I mean, they lost 68 games last year, 65 games the year before. 59 games in 22, 52 games in 21, and they lost 46 games in 2020, in spite of the fact that that was a shortened season due to COVID. But nonetheless, finally, it looks like the Pistons are getting in front of this thing, and that's big because, even though that the Pistons were unable to win a home game in front of their fans in this postseason. We saw the folks in the greater Detroit area show up and show out for this team. Why? Because they gave them something to cheer for, and not. I'm not just saying that. Just I mean, they didn't win a home playoff game. They won a playoff game for the first time since 2008. You got to go back to the 2008 Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston Celtics. Prior to this series, to find the last time that the Pistons even won a playoff game. Okay, that's number one. But this team embodied and the spirit of Detroit, and it doesn't matter who owns the Pistons, who runs the front office, who coaches this team. The Pistons, when they're winning, the Pistons, when they are competitive, it's all about a physicality and it's all about a tough brand of football. This is why, some people have gone as far to compare this year's Pistons team to the old bad boy Pistons of the Lambeer, Isaiah Thomas, Dennis Rodman, era. Not quite the bad boys, but they could be the bad boys for this era of basketball in the NBA. Okay. Um, but nonetheless, Detroit is a city that embodies that. And that's why, they gravitated to this team. This is why you saw former Pistons greats, come back and embrace this team, come back and support this team. And I think they have what it takes to go out there and build off of that because at first you started to see this team show signs of improvement throughout the year, and it was one of those where some people are like, well, you know what, maybe if they're just able to make the play in, that'll be a building block for them. They were better than just being a play in team. If they're able to not finish, to get 30 wins, they'll be okay. They were better than that. They finished with a winning record, okay, and they were top six in the East. And I think, that's something that you got to tip your cap to about for this organization. Of course, Trajan Langdon is running the front office, and of course, JB Bickerstaff is doing what he's doing on the sidelines. But again, this was a winnable series for the Pistons. They had multiple opportunities to win games. They didn't get it done. And it's just one of those, I think, that's going to come with experience. And I think, getting a guy like Jaden Ivey back, maybe he can be that second, consistent go-to option behind Cade Cunningham. That is going to be something going forward for the Pistons because, again, the formula has basically been the same when Detroit wins. They have a strong backcourt, scoring and physicality, and then they just have the guys that get after you in their front court. It worked with Isaiah's Pistons in the late 80s. It's something that worked with Chauncey and Rip and Ben Wallace and Sheed and those guys, in the mid 2000s, and they have the potential to make it work now. But nonetheless, for the first time in a very long time, these Pistons have given the basketball fans in the greater Detroit area something to cheer about. And I don't think anybody associated with this franchise should hang their heads after this series loss to the New York Knicks, a darn good New York Knicks team at that. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Pistons are able to go to work after this, how they're able to build off of this. But for the first time in a long time, the future is bright in the Motor City for Pistons basketball. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Guarantee you both things are always appreciated. Also, if you're on the X, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. Also, goes the same for Instagram, as you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. And like I always say, if you follow me, I give you that follow right back. Also, check me out on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365, a shameless plug, but as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. And one apology to everyone If you're checking this out, you might see something a little bit different tonight. Usually, I don't wear a hat uh, in relation to the sport that I'm talking about, but nonetheless, you see me talking about the Sixers right here, repping the Sixers on my noggin right now. But nonetheless, still, it's one of those where super salute to the Pistons for the competitive season that they had. And like I said, let's see if they can build off of that. But nonetheless, until the next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into this 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.